Hello and welcome to this edition of Dr. Clark's 101, The Living Classroom. Today we're talking politics 101 with Professor we're talking politics 101 with Professor George Amity Sr. And Professor Amity, greetings and welcome, my friend.
Greetings, greetings. Good to be here.
Yes, indeed. Political scientist and an individual who knows the good. Yeah, how you been?
Been doing good, doing great.
Okay, that's outstanding. And this is our last program of the year. We move now, and we'll be moving into 2025 pretty soon. But let's talk some real politics as this year closes down.
Okay.
And in particular, I want to begin on the national level and in the international arena, and because there are some things I think which are very, very important that we all need to know and we need to talk about. But at the forefront, uh, let's look in the international arena and look and see what's taking place and what's going on in the Middle East uh, with the Ukrainian conflict and Russia and the Middle East, and also what's taking place with North Korea. And so I just want to just get your take, your professional take, as a political scientist and individual who knows the good. And this Middle East is a conundrum. It's always been a conundrum for thousands of years, but it is a conundrum. Yes, sir.
Yeah, well, it appears as though the Biden administration, one of the things I think that hurt them in the presidential election was their inability to have any sort of check on Netanyahu and the Israeli government. And, for example, in the state of Michigan, the large number of Palestinians in Dearborn, I understood, voted for Jill Stein and didn't really vote for Kamala Harris. And I think that issue really hurt. On the other hand, it seems as though Bibi has bombed his way into where both Hezbollah has come to the table and there's a ceasefire, and that the question is how will that ceasefire hold? And if history is any lesson, we know what's going to happen there is that the ceasefire will only last as long as it takes the opposition to regroup. So, and of course, that's not the only point. There are other places in the Middle East where you still have the same tension and the same. So, this is an ongoing war, conflict that involves more than just the direct parties, but other surrogates as well.
Well, Professor Amity, yes, we know the Prime Minister of Israel. He's been under some domestic pressure uh, in terms of the judiciary there, in terms of conflicts, and there are those who state that if he were not in office, he would be indicted. And but on the flip side of this, he's held hostage to some extent by those individuals who are extreme right wing of him. He's already considered a right wing, but those who are Israelis who are part of the right wing, and they want more bombing and they want more retribution, and so to some extent he's held hostage. But my question to you is, and we know what Israel has done and the move that is made toward in the conflict. We see the reporting that's taking place, but I tend to look at some things with a jaded eye, in the sense that is America and this administration just working under the premise that hey, they have plausible deniability when Israel goes into different arenas and seek to bomb itself into success? Yes, sir.
Well, of course. I mean this once again, this administration, in spite of all of the rhetoric, and I'm talking about the Biden administration, has not been able to change the landscape. So now we have coming into office the Trump administration, who in many arenas have kind of put out the signal of being more of an isolationist, and so which is never good for the Middle East, so-called Middle East, when the United States is not actively involved. And if the Trump administration is involved, the prediction is it'll be worse than what it is in terms of the plight of the Palestinians as well.
Well, my final question on this particular issue is that statement as well is that President-elect Trump has indicated that that the Middle East conflict should be resolved and the American hostages, American-born hostages, should be released because when he comes into power, there's going to be a significant plan. There's going to be quote unquote hell to pay. Yes.
Well, we'll see.
Yeah.
I mean, the rhetoric about it takes one day and to negotiate something. We'll see whether that's the particular case, but I don't see that there can be. I mean, hell has already been paid.
Yeah.
So I'm not really sure his rhetoric will be able to match the results.
Ukraine, Russia. It looks as though everybody's up their ante. All the way. They looks like everyone. The Russians are up in the ante in terms of escalation, and the Ukrainians are up in their ante in terms of their escalation as well. And it looks as though also that the United States has upped the ante under the Biden administration. Is this a political strategy? You would think that before Donald Trump comes in to engage in some sort of strategy and negotiation for peace? Yes,
well,
sir.
I kind of think that the idea. So you're the great negotiator. Well, look, we're going to send the weapons with that. Putin said he would might put nuclear weapons on. So let's see how good of a negotiator. So I like the move by Biden to, everybody's saying he's weak, he's this, he's that, and the other. But in this particular case, he granted the weapons. The justification was that Russia had changed the trajectory of the war by adding North Korean troops and by just indiscretion bombing, which had been done previously but has gotten worsened. So Biden is saying, okay, you're saying you're going to threaten the country that supplies Ukraine, and what he turned around and does is give them permission to use more upscale, more effective, which has changed. But at the end of the day, Ukraine, I believe, is going to be forced to come to the table and probably be forced to give up some territory because they cannot rely on U.S. support, and I'm not sure the Europeans have the kind of commitment that Biden in the United States was willing to put forward.
Okay, now we look at the Middle East, we looked at the European theater, let's go over to the Asian theater and look at South Korea. My. Yes, and we see that there. Yes,
because they sort of elected a more right-leaning president, and in his reading, and I don't know if this rhetoric is that some of the people on the left were trying to ally themselves with North Korea, and so his posture was to declare martial law. And that was a mistake because one thing we see from the South Korean population that they are not like North Korea because they are invested in the idea of democracy. And so his unleashing of martial law resulted in not only the opposition being in the streets, but even those that are in his own party disagreed, and he had to reverse that. So but the instability is, the fact that this is supposed to be the United States' #1 ally in that particular area. We have troops there, and President Biden didn't have a clue that this was going to happen, speaks for a lack of knowledge with respect to our State Department and this current president.
And my final comment is that, hey, President Biden, his last official international trip to Angola, and the first trip of an American president to visit the nation of Angola, and also when you look at it, and the only trip that he's made to the continent of Africa, and it's the last trip. What does that say to you?
Well, it says to me one of the things that the United States has been, separate and apart from the trip there, they have been attempting to court the continent of Africa because of and trying to neutralize the influence of Russia and China, and so they're very influential on the continent, and so there were some commitments made to countries like Angola, and I think this was an attempt by President Biden to solidify the commitments that were made to Angola.
On his way out the door.
On his way out the door. Now, whether that will work, I'm not really sure. However, it doesn't send a good message once again, because if you look at what the group called BRICS, that's Brazil,
Yes.
Russia, India, China, and quote unquote South Africa is part of this group that is in the process of attempting to create an alternative global currency to the dollar. And so,
Precisely.
and even though, and so it'd be interesting to see how President Trump's position is everyone needs America, and if we would withhold our support, then that, but I think that's a very impressive coalition. I mean, you're talking not only the most populated countries, but even, militarily and economically very important countries. So, I say, I know the question is about Angola, but South Africa is a major player on the continent. And if they're moving away from the United States, then that tells me that we have some headwinds up ahead.
And one thing we need to recognize about South Africa is that we don't speak about it very often, is that South Africa has nuclear capability.
Absolutely.
And that's something which should be known. One African country that does have that. And also in the same construct is that the belief is now that Trump is trying to make America the new bully in the international sphere. But let's talk about something that I know that I want our listeners would like to get your view and comments on, and find out as an individual who understands, who's a political scientist and a PhD in political science and eminent professor, the Biden pardon. Yes, sir.
Well,
and the pardon of his son. And I just like to get your analysis and descriptive in terms of this approach. Yes, sir.
Well, it's most people said it would be expected. However, they criticized President Biden because he had so adamantly said that he would not do it. And also, if you understand Biden and his criticism of President Trump, it had more to do with the perception. I mean, the idea that he believed, and we always say there are two major cabinet positions that are quasi-independent. One is the Attorney General in the Department of Justice. The second is the Secretary of State. But even more so, not wanting to put their hand on tilting the scale when it comes to justice was part of Biden's major argument. And we know under the Trump administration what happened to Jeff Sessions. But, it's totally different. So now my contention is, and I don't have any information on this, I believe that Biden's intention was not to pardon him, but I believe there could have been some deal that he made with Vice President Harris. and that the expectation was that Vice President Harris was going to win. Because if anybody owed Biden, it's Kamala Harris, because he put her in the position to become president.
Richard Nixon vis-a-vis Gerald Ford.
Gerald Ford, yeah. But once again, that the same kind of thing. So, but that did not come through. So Biden's argument is that the reason why he's doing it, and he has some justification. Otherwise, I mean, if it was my son, I wouldn't say, the hell with y'all, say, I'm pardon my son, what I'm saying?
Well, I believe that is the sentiment of, I think, the majority of our listeners and majority of Americans, period.
But his argument is that, because you remember, Hunter had negotiated a deal, and that the deal was that he would have something lesser. But now the question becomes, wasn't these the people in his own Justice Department that did this? Which reinforces to me the idea that he took his hands off, but some kind of way through the Justice Department and the courts, Hunter, I believe they were looking to give him the worst possible sentences and would not cut him a break. And that's what Biden's argument was. Yes, that's fine. He's guilty, but you're treating him very differently than anybody else would be treated. And because he had a deal, you knocked that out. And so I'm not going to let my son suffer to that extent based on his association with me. And I think it was the right decision.
We see that, and we've got to recognize also that much of his success also came through his association with his father.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now,
yeah. And so
yes,
Jared Kushner's father-in-law.
100%. 100%. And in-laws and extended families, all the other et cetera to go along with it.
Yeah, so,
ambassadorships.
Yeah. But what it does, the downside is now Trump has a real argument to say, which I think he would do anyway, maybe pardon all the January 6 people. He may do all of that anyway.
Well, that's what some of the Republicans said. We're going to pardon anyone. One of them is some of the Republican leadership has said you should pardon the January 6 people along with the son. But anyway, but let's look at this. Let's look at something that these confirmation nominations. And we can look at them in global, but these confirmation nominations, what would you say is the political strategy that's behind this? Because there is some strategizing that's taking place.
Let's put it like this.
The strategy is first with President-elect Trump, and the strategy with the Congress.
So the idea is the perspective. What is the perspective that a president has for who should be nominated or considered for a cabinet position? So you got, the idea that it's people who can clear an FBI, a research of their background, people who have not had felonies or problems with the criminal justice system, people who are, to some extent, qualified for the positions. That's the norm. Well, it appears as though that's not the norm, because first and foremost, with those nominated by Trump, it seems as though there's just the opposite. You have to have been molested somebody or been a rapist, or you have to have been convicted of something. And he never agreed to any FBI clearance. In fact, he says the FBI is part of the deep state. And then the qualifications appear to be, if you're loyal to me, if you're willing to do whatever I'm asking you to do. So you got two different approaches to nominees. So in terms of that, so to me, that was his criteria. The question to me is, and this is a very interesting question because everyone, the fear going into the election for many and the issue of democracy related to the fact of having Trump be a true dictator where no one would be willing to stand in his way. And that does not seem the case with respect to this because Matt Gaetz got canned. Many people predicted that, if Trump wanted him, he was going to get it. Didn't happen. The other guy who's now being considered is being even the attorney general. So it seems as though, and I kind of got this indication from whoever won the Senate majority leader, Thune. So the mega faction did not win that battle. The votes for the traditional Republicans, it was like 29-22, outnumbered the votes for the MAGA Republicans. And so you have, particularly in those mountain areas and, Iowa and Montana, and then of course we know Utah is not a big MAGA country. So you do have some pushback in addition to Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski. So it may be a little different, harder than Trump has predicted. And I think that's good because our notion that he would just be able to be a peer dictator seemed to have been overblown.
Well, I would also argue that Trump recognized immediately and knew that by the fact that he wanted to have interim appointments, because he knew that there were factions that existed within the Republican Party,
right?
And also knowing that he would basically be a lame duck president as well. Yeah. And so those factions is not really going. Those factions can work against you, especially after the first 2 years and beyond. And so he recognizes. So therefore, he's trying to supersede this. And how effective he's going to be is a big question, a big concern. Now, we recognize those issues and what they can recognize the nature of his strategy and what he is doing to implement this and to see how it's going to work. I want to look at something too that is important for all of us, and I want to turn the conversation and talk about something here in state and local, and that is the nature and notion of the gun violence that exists here in the city of New Orleans, and it's everywhere, country, rural, city, but your view.
Well, if you listen to the press conferences from the city, the argument has been made, and I think it's a valid argument, that statistics-wise, the gun violence has been on decline, and in terms, particularly the murder rate. And that's a valid point. Of course, that doesn't help people who have relatives or who have experienced gun violence. The fact that statistically things are better if you're a direct impact, and the impact is not just on those who've been shot, but the trauma of those who participate in those events, and the impact on the economic development of the city. So, I tend to think that it's, what we have to be beware of people associating the incidents that happen strictly to African American culture or to blacks in particular, and make sure that solutions that come up address some of the fundamental problems. And some of the problems in terms of the violence, we know, have to do with people who are familiar with one another, people who, have beefs with one another. But a lot of it as well is deep-rooted in some of the economic indicators that we see in the city of New Orleans. And it seems as though, especially in terms of our economic development and our planning to address this, that, there's still, everything is about downtown. Everything is about the French Quarter. And the ironic thing is, trench quarters appears to be not as safe as anywhere else. And the question is, when are we going to really seriously get someone in office whose objective is to expand the pie, who directly, will develop economic development projects aimed at those communities and those individuals who think that that's the only alternative.
And that's what I want you to address. We're moving toward October 11, 2025, the mayor's race, and specifically the remaining 3 minutes that we have before you can tell me what we should be concerned about over the course of the next few weeks. Excuse me. At the top of the pyramid, mayor's race. What should be at the top of the pyramid in terms of the issues of concern? You can give us the 3 that you think are important.
Well,
yes, sir.
Once again, clearly crime is one, but clearly also economic development is another one that's very, very important. And so, and I don't mean that in the sense that we failed in terms of bringing in tourism and other economic engines. And then the third is also, for me, will we fall into the pattern of Jackson, Mississippi, and we already see that, where the governor is attempting to superimpose the will of the state on the city of New Orleans, and will our elected officials collapse or just allow that to happen. I love what Judge Etta Julian did
with the homeless,
and saying, look, you have to go through a certain process within the city in order for that to happen. So that's definitely something that we need to look at. But the candidates, we know who they are. Those are we know possibly Councilman Thomas, Helena Moreno, but the question is, who else is going to be in that scenario? Will it be Ross DuPlessis? Will it be Arthur Hunter? And what impact will they have on the race?
Yes, sir, absolutely. I want to thank you for joining me. And you know something? When we come back in January, it's going to be on and popping, as they say, because it's going to be very real during that particular period, January 2025.
Yeah,
yes, sir.
Well, Trump's going to be in office. It's all theoretical now. So now we're going to see whether 2025 plan will be on the top of the agenda.
And again, this is Dr. Clark's One-on-One, the Living Classroom with Professor George Amadei Sr. And as always, it's been a pleasure.